Shalom, how's everyone doing? Today is day 13 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and we'll be learning Siman Beis Seif Vav. Tov lahakbid b'netilas yadayim shachris. It's very good to be particular when it comes to washing our hands in the morning, bechli, that we use like a real vessel, uvemayim, and with water, uvekoach gavra, and it should be put on our hands through human force. Kimo b'netilas yadayim l'seuda, like we find by netilas yadayim for a meal. L'kaman Siman Mem, as we'll see later in Siman Mem. Ach b'shas hadchak. But if you're you're not able to, she'ein lo mayim karoi, you don't have the right type of water, v'hu rotzeh lespalel, and you want to daven, yachol litol yadav mitoch kol davar, you could use anything to use your hand, even if you don't use a real kli, uv'chol minei mayim, any type of water, uv'lo koach gavar, and you don't need human force, v'yachol levarich al netilas yadayim, and you're able to still make the bracha al netilas yadayim. V'im yesh lefanav nahar, if you have a river in front of you, tov yoser she'yitbol bo yadav shalosh pamim, it's a very good thing to dip your hands into the river 3 times, or even snow. Aval im ein lo mayim klal. Let's say you don't have water at all. So what do? Yikanach yadav be'ez davar, right? Wipe your hands on anything, right? Maybe like a cloth or something. Vivarich al nekiyus yadayim, and you can't say bracha al netilas yadayim, which means washing hands. You have to say the bracha al nekiyus yadayim, which means cleaning hands. V'day lo l'tfila, and you're good to daven, right? You have good hands for davening. But afterwards you'll find water, v'chilam haru'im, in the right type of vessel. Yitol yadav od hapam karoi, aval lo yivarich od. Right, go wash again, but don't make a bracha. So, what halachos are we dealing now? Until this sif, we've been dealing with halachos of getting rid of ruach ra, getting rid of this bad spirit on our hands in the morning. And there's a very specific way of doing that. Washing 3 times, back and forth, very specific. Seems like we're going off that a little bit. It seems like we're going to other reasons we wash our hands, namely the reasons of the Rosh and the Rashba. Obviously, as we've said, the reason the Rosh holds, at least we make a bracha on washing our hands in the morning, is because one must have clean hands for davening. So you wash your hands, you have clean hands for davening, you just did the mitzvah, you make a bracha. According to the Rashba, it's nothing really to do with clean hands, but it's really the act of washing. We're like a Kohen before he does the avoda, and that act of washing is why we say the bracha. So the question really is, the Rosh says the reason we make a bracha, wash our hands in the morning, is to have clean hands for davening. So the question is, how important is it, the process of washing? Right now, if you look in the Kitzur, he's comparing it to netilas yadayim of Seuda. Netilas yadayim of Seuda is a whole different ballgame. It's totally different. That's about, the reason we wash our hands before meal is because they used to wash their hands before they ate truma, and it was a very specific process, what they would do. Very, very specific. It wasn't to have clean hands for eating. That's not why they washed their hands before they had truma. It was a very specific way. However, when it comes to washing hands in the morning, the Rosh says, it doesn't have to be so specific. Right? He writes, it's just about having clean hands. Right? He says, why do we even use like a vessel? Why do we do that? It's because we say a bracha al netilas yadayim. Right? And the word netila really means natala, means to take, so we want to take a kli. But really you don't need it. Right? That's what the Beis Yossi points out in the Rosh. According to the Rosh, you just have to have clean hands for davening. So, in order to do that, you could really just use anything. Right? We said before, in order to get rid of ruach ra, you need a kli, you have to wash 3 times. But let's say you're not doing that, right? Let's say, as we've said before, that if it was just because of a ruach ra concern, that would not be mechayiv a bracha. That doesn't have anything to do with the bracha, right? We quoted from the Magen Avraham, we quoted from the Rambam, that whenever we wash our hands because of a sakana, we don't make a bracha, right? Ruach ra is al sakana. So now we're dealing with just having clean hands. So therefore, it's very, makes a lot of sense that according to the Rosh, we wake up in the morning, technically you don't really need a kli. You just have to have clean hands. So as long as you have clean hands, now you can say the bracha of netilas yadayim. However, let's think about the Rashba. The Rashba seems to say that we learn everything from a Kohen before he did the avoda, and it happens to be before the Kohen did the avoda, it was actually a pretty particular way of washing. You need a kli, right? So the Rashba, he goes through the whole thing. He says, no, really, you do need a kli, right? He says he proves this even from a Gemara Maseches Chulin. There's a Gemara Maseches Chulin that says you could wash your hands in the morning, netilas yadayim shachris, and that could cover a meal you have later in the day. So we see, when it comes to a meal, everyone in the world agrees you need a kli. you need a real kli. So same thing. He says by shachris you need a real kli, and he explains why. And he says because the kohen before he did the avodah used a kli. So that's why it's very puzzling. If you look in the Aruch Shulchan, he says it's very puzzling what Shulchan Aruch says, right? Shulchan Aruch uses a lashon, and he says tov, right? Like the Kitzur says, he says tov lahakbid b'netilas yadayim shachris b'chol devarim hama'akvin b'netilas yadayim suda. Right? Shulchan Aruch says like it's a very nice thing that just like by suda we have all these things we use a kli and whatever we do, same thing you should do by shachris. Aruch Shulchan says, okay, maybe according to the Rosh, that's it's a tov, it's like a nice thing because that's the lashon of the bracha. But according to the Rashba, of course you need a kli, right? You're not yotze according to the Rashba if you don't have a kli, right? And who else points this out? The Yad Ephraim points this out. The Morok Tzia points this out, right? So the major question is like as we've discussed in a previous shir, in order to say the bracha of Netilas Yadayim in the morning, you really need to be Yotzei both the Shita of the Rosh and the Rashba, and seemingly if you don't use a Kli, you're not, according to the Rashba, you've done nothing. According to the Rosh, you have clean hands. That's fine. According to the Rashba, you've done nothing. So how can Shulchan Aruch paskin, and how can, right, we see in the Kitzur here, paskins, even if you don't use a Kli, so seemingly you're not Yotzei according to the Rashba, who says you need a Kli, how can you say a bracha? So I think the answer is Pasha. What's the answer? If you look at the Rashba and the Tshuva, he calls the bracha of Netilas Yadayim one of the Birchas HaShachar. So that's seemingly puzzling, right? What would I think? I would think that the bracha of Netilas Yadayim we say in the morning is a birchas mitzvah, right? Right? Just you do the mitzvah of washing your hands, you say a bracha, and that's probably what the Rosh holds. But the Rashba clearly writes in the Tshuva that Netilas Yadayim is just one of the birchas hashachar. Why am I saying? Why do I care about this? I'll tell you why I care about this. The Ramah in Siman Memvav, he talks about a case. He says, let's say somebody doesn't wear shoes in the morning. Right, one of the birchas hashachar we say it's called she'asuli kol tzarki. If you look in Chazal, why do we say the bracha of she'asuli kol tzarki? It means he's done all my needs. What does that mean? It means he gave us shoes. So let's say somebody doesn't want to wear shoes one day, because does he still make the bracha? You know what the Ramah says? The Ramah says yes, you do. Why? You make the bracha minhag olam. Right? Everyone's putting on shoes. You make the bracha. So now we could explain how even if you don't wash your hands in the morning correctly, you could still make a bracha of Netilas Yadayim. Right? According to the Rosh, you can make the bracha because you have clean hands. That's all you need, and that's what the halacha is. But according to the Rashba, true, you do not fulfill your mitzvah, but it's fine. The bracha of Netilas Yadayim, according to the Rashba, we say in the morning, is not a birchas mitzvah. It's just one of the birchas hashachar, and since it's one of the birchas hashachar, there's no need for one to actually do that action, right? To actually wash your hands in accordance of the halacha, but rather we make it on minhag olam. That's why, if you look in the Aruch Shulchan, he goes so far to say that even if you don't wash your hands at all, as we'll explain later, even if you don't wash your hands at all, according to the Rashba, you actually Taka would say a bracha on the Netilas Yadayim. He doesn't explain why, but must be because it's a birchas hashachar, it's on a minhag olam. Okay, that's just the first part of the Kitzur. The next part of the Kitzur, he says something else, and he says the best thing to do if you don't have a kli, you should dip your hands into the river. Why? Because if you look in Hilchas Netilas Yadayim of a Suda, actually putting in the river helps. But he says an interesting thing. He says you dip it in 3 times. What's the point of dipping it in 3 times? I thought we just said that if you don't have a kli, you're not getting rid of ruach ra. So who cares? Like, why are you dipping it in 3 times? What does that do? So if you look in Shulchan Aruch, Shulchan Aruch is actually mistapik. Shulchan Aruch in Siman Daled Sif Yud Beis, he's mistapik about it. He says it's not so clear to get rid of ruach ra. You need 3 pourings. Maybe 3 dippings are enough. He says true. If you have 1 bucket and you dip your hands into that 3 times, that doesn't get rid of the ruach ra, because right when you dip it in the first time, it will make all the water tameh. It will make all the water have ruach ra. But maybe if it's a big river, maybe that's okay. But even without that, it's still best to do this river idea. So at least you could at least imitate Netilas Yadayim of a Su'uda. And the last thing the Kitzur says, he says about this bracha on the Kiyus Yadayim. So where is this? The Rosh himself says it. The Rosh says, let's say you're not using water. Let's say you're just wiping your hands on a cloth. The Rosh says, seemingly, even if you're using water, you shouldn't say bracha Netilas Yadayim, because Netilas Yadayim sounds like you're using a kli. right? Because natila means you pick up the kli. But he's masking even if you don't use a kli, since it's very similar to netilas yadayim of a su'uda, you still make a bracha of al netilas yadayim. However, if you are not using water at all, you're not imitating netilas yadayim of a su'uda at all. No imitation there. Therefore, it would not make sense to make a bracha of al netilas yadayim. Rather, you make a bracha of al nekiyus yadayim. And that's how we hold. That's the Shulchan Aruch Paskins. The Mishnah Berurah says this is the opinion of the Achronim. Even though, as I said before, the Rashba Taka would hold you would say al netilas yadayim, but like we said, we say al nekiyus yadayim in that situation. And then the Kitzur ends off saying that in all these situations, once you get more water, you should wash a full washing of 3 times, because even though you've washed your hands for davening, but once again, we tried to get rid of the ruach ra, even though we clearly say that if you don't get rid of the ruach ra, you can still daven, it's still okay. But we want to make sure that, at least in some point of the day, we get rid of the ruach ra, and that's by doing a full washing 3 times on the hand. Okay, shkoyach.